Welcome, Guardians. This will be my first story of Destiny while the Taken King has come out, so this is all new grounds to discover, new things. There's some really crazy stories all behind this Taken King because, Taken King was very story-driven, it had cutscenes, cinematics, but Destiny just loves to keep on hiding that amazing storyline. And this is, as you can tell by the title of the video, Oryx's origins. But, he actually wasn't called Oryx to begin with. In fact, some of you may think of him as, a guy, a dude. He's actually not. He was originally a girl hive, or female hive. His name, or her name, was Aurash. He had two sisters, Zero, sorry, I don't really know if that's actually it, but that's kind of what it looks like, and Zathona. The three of them were the daughters of the Osmium King who ruled over the continent of the Osmium Court. And you're wondering what the continent was. Well, there's a gas giant named Fundament somewhere far out there. And if you know space, gas giants don't have land, but the Hive's original planet was on a crash course with the Fundament gas giant, and unfortunately it did collide. So now, the Hive's once solid planet has now shattered into millions of pieces. Some pieces are bigger than others, so the Hive are able to actually live on those pieces. They're called shards. They're pretty much just floating continents, which is pretty insane. When the Osmium King was 10 years old, which in relation to proto-hives, which is the original hives, it's actually a very long time. The Osmium King had succumbed to a certain kind of madness, stuff that we know to be as senile. There was an event called the Saizga, this is so hard to read, wherein the Fundament's 52 moons would align and create a massive tidal wave that would destroy all of Fundament's civilizations. Teox, a sterile mother, who served as a teacher of the king's daughters, because the king was probably off doing busy stuff, feared that the royal heirs were too weak to succeed the king and invited a rival kingdom. These were the helium drinkers of the Helium Court. What they did was they were sent to infiltrate the Osmium Court and kill the royal family, and allow Teox to rule the Osmium Court as their regent. But Aurash and her sisters, 2 years old at the time, escaped on a ship and went far away. They swore revenge on them, but there's not much they can do. After a year of traveling the seas, the sisters salvaged an ancient ship, a high-tech ship, and it was called the Needle. Zero wanted to sell it at the Cahorn Atoll, a gathering place to Fundament's many species, in order to raise enough money to hire a mercenary army. But Aurash wanted to take command of the ship. Zathona sided with Aurash, goaded on by a worm that their father had kept. The worm had washed up on the Osmium Court shores and was seemingly dead, but Zathona could hear it speak. The sisters spent the next 2 years reactivating the ship until Aurash decided to use it to fulfill its intended purpose. She wanted to dive the Fundament's core in the hopes of learning a secret that would prevent the Saizigi. As they descended, the sisters encountered a vast creature called the Leviathan. This is a disciple of the Traveler. Is it in his spherical shape? I have no idea, but just the sentence, a disciple of the Traveler, is pretty intense. The Leviathan warned the sisters against proceeding further, telling them that they faced a choice between the sky and the deep, the light and the darkness, the way of life and the way of death. The sisters rejected the Leviathan, unable to accept that allowing their people to suffer was a better way, and instead decided to follow the worm Zathona had saved, which urged them to continue diving. Deep within the Fundament Ocean, the sisters encountered the worms. You may see these worms on the Dreadnought, and what these worms do is they draw from the power of the darkness. Yule, the Honest Worm, Yor, Xiol, Yer, and Akka, you may recognize these names from the chests, are the virtuous worms. The worm gods claimed that they had lived and grown in the Fundament's depths for millions of years, trapped by the Leviathan and the Traveler. They had called many species to Fundament, hoping one day one would be tenacious enough to find them. They offered Zero, Zathona, and Aurash immortality if they would allow themselves to be hosts for the worm's larvae, with the caveat that if the sisters ceased to obey their natures, Zero's desire to test her strength, Zathona's cunning, Aurash's inquisitiveness, their worms would consume them. Furthermore, the stronger the sisters became, the greater their worms' appetites would be. The sisters reluctantly accepted the pact. Zero took the night morph and became Zivu Arath. Zathona took the mother morph and became Zaphathun, and Aurash took the king morph, transforming into a male and becoming Auryx, the king of the hive. Over the following years, the siblings returned to their people and spread the worms among them, creating the first hive and enabling them to first liberate the osmium court, then drove Teox and other fearful species of the Fundament to Cahorn Atoll, finally to build spaceships and break free of Fundament entirely. Continuing on, Oryx, or Auryx, the way it's spelled, went on a campaign of destruction. This is almost like a story arc. As Auryx and his sisters forced an ultimatum on the remaining proto-hive to accept the worms or perish, Auryx turned his attention to the Fundament's moons, and the Ammonites, there who had allied with the Traveler and gave asylum to Teox. Initially, he was willing to negotiate with the Ammonites, but his sister, now Zavathun, under pressure from the worms, killed Auryx as punishment. Rebuked, which is kind of like what Oryx did with us, where he got really big, Auryx purged what sympathy and goodwill he had left, becoming a merciless tyrant. He and his sisters warred with and killed one another on a regular basis, but because they are immortal, they can keep on doing it over and over again. The reason for killing each other so much was because of their worship of the sword logic and their attempt to become the sharpest blades in the universe. Their war of revenge against Teox had transformed into a campaign of genocide when they slew the Ammonites and other interstellar civilizations to feed their worms. He even slew his patron god Akka so that he may steal his ability and to call upon the deep, and created the Tablets of Ruin, which gave him the power to take. His transformation complete, Auryx was now Oryx, the Taken King. During the Hive's campaign against the Harmony and the Vex, I will go into detail about what the Harmony are. For right now, I'll just tell you that they are dragons. Quira, Blade Transform, presented Oryx with a simulation of his former self, Aurash. Oryx looked upon the simulation with amusement, while Aurash looked up at Oryx in horror, demanding to know what he had done to her sisters and her people. In the end, Oryx slew Quira and presented the Vex corpse and its simulation to Zavathun. When she asked him what proof they had and what they were doing was right, Oryx simply replied that the Hive's existence was proof enough in their convictions to live eternal by the sword logic. And that is how Oryx the Taken King, who was once Auryx, who was once Aurash, became the guy, girl, whatever he, she may be, that we know today. Some things to go back on because this is just a lot of information. One of the main highlights that I want to point out is the Leviathan, the disciple of the Traveler. He was a massive, intelligent creature that resided deep within the ocean of the gas giant Fundament long ago. Now I'm speaking in present terms. Leviathan aided in imprisoning the 5 worm gods within the planet's core. But when the meeting of the 3 sisters, he tried to persuade them to follow the light, to avoid the darkness that resided below, but as you do know, they did not care, they kept going. And what Leviathan did after that was he tried to escape and live amongst the Ammonites, or just find protection from them in the Fundament's moons. Even though the Ammonites had their best forces protecting Leviathan, the Hive, now gods, had no problem slaying Leviathan, and they destroyed the Ammonite civilization, forcing the Traveler, who was there at the time, looking over this, to flee for safety. Leviathan's corpse was fed to the worm gods Ear and Yule. What the Leviathan looks like, we have no idea. My guess is he probably looks a lot like a sphere, but at this point I have no idea, because I mentioned the Harmony, which are pretty much just a Hamkara, but very, very large. So what things look like anymore, I have no idea. Bungie just does not give any illustrations of what these things look like, what Aurash looked like, what Zero looked like, what Zavathun looked like. But anyways, that's been it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed. I will continue with this Oryx storyline because he has a lot more to go into, because his campaign of destruction can actually be in a lot more detail. I kind of just skimmed over it. This is mostly focusing on his origins and how he became who she, he, whatever it is now. So hit that like if you enjoyed learning about Destiny's intense storyline that's hidden beneath everything, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Later, Guardians.